So I was looking through some numbers, which you love, and I'm excited to tell you about. And so there's a statistic called expected points added, which let me just set this up for you so it makes sense in football terms. If you're at the 50-yard line and you throw a swing pass to Dalvin Cook and he shreds 3 tackles and he runs for 15 yards to the 35, your expectation of scoring, the percentage chance you think of scoring points, shoots through the roof to go from the 50 to the 35. Okay. All of a sudden you're feeling like touchdown is possible, field goal, worst case example. Well, the statistics back that up. So if you take every play that a player is involved with and look at how many times they got you closer to scoring, then you get an expected points added. So how much better they would have been if you say, spike the ball or something. Okay. So does that make some sense?
Yeah.
Now, Dalvin Cook's was similar to Adam Thielen and Stefon Diggs in the passing game. So meaning passes that went to Dalvin Cook were as valuable as Diggs and Thielen, which is super rare. And the only other running back that I could find who was similar was, well, at least this year, was Christian McCaffrey, who had a similar impact that was receiver-like in getting you closer to scoring.
Yeah, incredible.
So there's a conversation that's going to go on forever in this offseason about Dalvin Cook and whether to sign him to a contract extension. Todd Gurley might be on the trade block. David Johnson might get cut. Devontae Freeman has been a disappointment. These guys who signed contracts that hasn't worked out super well for lately for running backs. I think if you make it a plan, a resolution in 2020 to throw the ball to Dalvin Cook 100 times and not run him 200 times, but use Alexander Mattison more for the ground and pound, the stuff that wears down these running backs, that Cook makes such an impact in the passing game, it would be worth it if that was the plan, to really enhance using him in the passing game and dial back on how often you're just slamming him up the middle.
It's hard. That's hard to do, dude. That's so hard to be like, listen, we're going to throw him a screen pass. We're not going to let him run his favorite play. I mean, I get that you want to like save his legs and you want to save the wear and tear, but let's not forget what the number one rule is in football: to win the game. And however you got to do that, you got to do that. Now, his numbers are stupid sick because his screen pass game is incredible. Like you said, his swing route's incredible because when you get ahead of steam and you're going that fast, you don't even have to sidestep anybody. You just run through people. And that's what makes him so dangerous, is that he's one of those guys that can catch a flare out and you're like, oh my God, this could be dangerous. Like a play that should be 2-3 yards could be 15 easily if he just doesn't blink. I mean, that's incredible. But you talked about it. The running backs are getting left behind. And look at the ones that you just named. 2 years ago, people would have been like, dude, you're crazy. These guys are the next generation.
Yep.
Now they're like, who? David Johnson? Is he still on the Cardinals? Like, dude, they're gone. They're done with that. And the problem becomes, then you have so much wear and tear on these guys that it's like, well, that was their career. That was the short end of it. And it's a nasty position. And if you're good at it, yeah, you're like Zeke and you can get paid. But even he had a tough time this year. Eventually people have your number. And I think that that's really going to turn so many people away, because it's going to end up being one of these, we can do it with 3 young guys as opposed to one main guy. Like Derrick Henry's going to get paid from somebody. There's no question. Le'Veon Bell got paid. Derrick Henry will get paid. His success, he could change the game forever. Who knows? The problem becomes when you look back at the rest of the guys that got paid, it's just not a good track record. And people tend to look at that and go, do I want to be the next team to make that silly mistake?
Right. Yes. You're 100% correct.
But we love Dalvin.
Exactly. He's so good, and he's making such a huge impact in the passing game, which I think is ultimately way more valuable than what you do in the running game, or way more hard to replace. Let me put it that way. It's super valuable to have a guy who's going to average 4.5 to 5 yards a carry. It's just that there are a lot of guys who generally, or even in a rotation, can do that. If you have a good offensive line at run blocking, you have a great scheme, which we know the Vikings will have with Rick Dennison. But when you're talking about guys who can rack up 80, 90 catches, who you can target 100 times, that's where you usually only talk about special players. Right. And I was thinking about Marshall Faulk and how good Marshall Faulk was into his late 20s and even slightly early 30s. But usually what we're talking about with running backs is late 20s. And if Dalvin signed a contract extension for 5 years, let's say, 3 of them are where most of the money is at. You're talking about taking him from age 24, 25 to 28, 29, which is usually the fringe end of where running backs sort of stop being super valuable, unless they're your buddy Frank Gore, in which he just can still do it when he's however old he is now. But, late 20s, you could still be super effective. And I was looking at Marshall Faulk, who I know is an all-time great player. But when he was playing on those Rams teams, they were throwing him the ball 100 times every single year. And he continued to be super effective by having a workload, but not the same kind of workload that just getting hammered up the middle over and over and over again. I think that's where you rack up a lot of injuries. So if you were to tell me that instead of 250 carries, Dalvin Cook gets 150, but 100 targets, then I think it might be worth it to do that because he's so exceptional in the passing game.
I'm glad you said that because here's what I'm thinking. You already said it, right? We're going to drop him 100 carries. Do the defenses really fear you that much anymore? Do we play base as much? Maybe we play you nickel now. You're just going to throw him the ball? Dude, you've played right into our wheelhouse.
Or do they follow like a moth to flame and just if you put two tight ends out there, they're like must-have linebacker?
I don't think they're that dumb because I think that eventually your tendencies are going to show. You're not going to be handing him the ball as much. You're going to be throwing it to him. By game 3 or 4, teams are going to go, all right, you know what? Start at nickel, make them prove it to us now. Like, that's what you don't want. You want them starting in base, like, please don't run the ball. Right, yeah, just don't. Yep. Like, that is so. I mean, imagine what I just said. That's your whole game plan. Them looking at you like, please, God, just don't run the ball. Okay? Don't hand it to them. You want to throw it to them? Dude, we'll find excellent linebackers. Excellent linebackers are starting to show up everywhere now. These guys that can cover and tackle and hit and want to be crazy, dude, they're coming around now. So if you want to use him as that, well, now you're looking at a whole new offense, I feel like, because now people are going to technically look at you and go, are you really going to run it as much as you say you're not going to? Like, if the game was on the line and you know that handing it to Dalvin in the second half would get you the win, would you eventually abandon your own game plan? You know what I'm saying? Like, eventually, at what time are you like, Dalvin, we were just kidding. We're going to hand you the ball 300 times. Yeah. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's another thing is if you are going to get away from the run game, I mean, what does he say about that? I mean, there's so many questions to ask yourself, but I don't think you would have the same offense as you have now because now we're going to beat the living piss out of you until you don't want it, and then we're going to throw it over you. Now you're just changing it to, well, we're going to kind of change it up. So we're still going to give him the ball, but we're not going to hand it to him. He's not going to have that head of steam at times. He's just going to catch and turn and run. Like, now you're kind of killing this guy.
Okay, so now here's my question, though. Do you get closer to winning by keeping Dalvin Cook at 150 carries and 100 passing targets per year and having Alexander Mattison, who averaged 4.5 yards a carry last year, handle a ton more of the running and mix it up with whoever else? I mean, if you like Mike Boone, then go with Mike Boone or get somebody else in the draft or whatever you want to do to have that rotation for running and have Dalvin even line up in the slot sometimes or run a jet sweep sometimes or whatever. Like, get real creative with him as opposed to a traditional running back where he's just carrying the ball over and over and over again. Do you get closer to winning by that or letting him go and rolling the dice on whatever ends up in your backfield after that?
No, because you know what? You got me thinking now, dude. Like a flex back. Oh, my God. You know I love me a flex back out there.
Who doesn't love a flex back?
Dude, a guy that can catch, a guy that can do the reverses. Like kind of like almost like a Deebo Samuel, but in a true running back form. Dude, listen. If you were to do that, think about this. If you were to really be like, hey, legitimately, we're going to take away some of your carries, but don't worry, we're going to give it to Alexander Mattison, Mike Boone, whoever. Then all of a sudden you start to have both of best worlds, right? Like you have Dalvin, who's incredible, and he's in the backfield. Someone eventually is going to be like, all right, he could get handed the ball. Like maybe they're just messing with us. So maybe I'm thinking more like 7 or 8 weeks that they're like, all right, we'll play you nickel. But you could have 2 other guys in there too, like take a little bit of this load off of him, add it to these guys. So now you got to have like a running back by committee with your big superstar back there too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. And Madison and Cook on the field at the same time. This was a thing that really didn't happen much with Latavius Murray, and I thought it should have.
Yes.
Like why?
Yes.
I mean, how about Bo Jackson and Marcus Allen on the field at the same time? Like, having 2 more great players on the field is not a bad idea. And just looking through the running backs who have bucked the trend long term, they almost always have this element to them. Even Matt Forte is a good example. A guy who late in his career, he had 100 catches at age 29 and ran for over 1,000 yards. Now, he was still getting over 200 carries, but he wasn't a 300 carry guy in a time in the NFL where they love to give 300 carries to their running backs and ruin them by age 27. If you're talking about you get to keep a great player and he has longevity, and he has an impact in the passing game where you can help win. And let's say you do move on from Kirk Cousins. Well, what's the best thing you can ever give to a rookie quarterback? a swing pass that goes
Yeah.
behind the line of scrimmage and turns into 15 yards.
Absolutely, 100%. And then not only that, but you're taking a lot of the stress off him from running the ball, and you're giving it. And now that's another thing too, is now you can go out and get a guy like you know who I'm already thinking of, like a Mike Davis. Go out there and get a guy that's just going to run down your face, like love to get the ball like 50 times a year and be like, yes, I will do everything I can to get every single inch, dude. I kind of like where your head's at.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad I convinced you. I'm glad I brought you around.
So now here's the question, though. You come up to this, you start talking about like, hey, listen, we're going to take away your carries. Do you think that would eventually hurt him in the contract? Like, hey, listen, we are also feeding two other monsters back here too now. You know what I'm saying? Like, you kind of take his role away from him a little bit.
Well,
And
so
you,
my thing is you sign him to the contract and then make that his role. So you sign him to a contract assuming he's going to make a bigger impact in the passing game, which is how you win. Right? That's
Right.
how I would be looking at it. Is it's even part of the negotiation of, all right, in order to get our full amount of money, you got to line up in the slot sometimes, and you got to run a reverse sometimes, and you have and I think he's willing to do this stuff. When he was at Florida State, he played outside receiver from time to time. I mean, he would do anything for them, and the Vikings just have not done that a lot with him. In part because I think Mike Zimmer loves an I-form handoff up the middle. And he is so effective in the running game, and it does set up the play action and all that. But it's been shown statistically that you can still succeed play action even if you don't have the greatest running game. So I don't think that the impact there is as huge as we make it out to be. Hey, your guy Sam Bradford in 2016 was one of the best play action passers in the league, and it was the 32nd ranked running game. So
but
it still works. There's not as many 2nd and 4s. I get it, but it's
right. That's what I'm saying. Like,
but if your drop off in actual running the football is from 4.8 yards per carry to 4.5 yards per carry, there is a difference in how it's viewed by the defense a little bit. But in terms of your actual production, not much. And if you're throwing to him more, then your production, your passing game goes up.
Right, because like you were saying before, his passing numbers are stupid.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, and you know what? I think when you talk about the creativity, number one, I mean, we joke about seeing him on a reverse, but have you ever really seen him on a reverse? Like, that's a long way to run for a running back. Like,
it is. Yeah.
That might, like, I kind of laughing because I could picture a few of them running. You'd be like, nah, that doesn't look good. So, you know, that's another question. Like, say you put him out there and it doesn't go as planned. Like, say he gets into the slot and it doesn't look like you want it to look. Like, he looks good taking a screen pass, or he looks good taking a swing route. Those are different. Like, you start running real routes, you're starting going against linebackers and people that are going to bump coverage you and start throwing you around a little bit. You know, and then all of a sudden you got to think like defensive ends. They're going to be like, listen, man, whatever happens, chip that dude before he goes out on his route. So now you got dudes hitting you all over. So it's like, man, what's the least evil out here? Like, we're trying to save his legs. We're trying to keep him for the long term. We're trying to make our offense also super effective. And I think when you talk about not having seen him do these things, I don't think it was Stefanski's time to be like, hey, listen, let's get exotic guys. Let's get crazy. You know, like, that's just not him. But that's also not what I feel like Coobs is going to do. Like, I don't know if I see Coobs being crazy off the wall like Andy Reid. Like, wait, who is that in the slot? Is that a guard?
Or Kyle Shanahan. Yeah.
Right. Like, those are guys that they're not afraid to take risks because they've done it in the past and it's either succeeded so well that people have so much credibility for them, or it failed miserably and they were quick to be like, listen, that's stupid. Let's not do that again. You know? So Stefanski wasn't really, and to his credit, he didn't really have the head coach to be like, coach, now listen, we're going to put Dalvin out in the X.
Right.
We're going to put Thielen in the backfield. He'd be like, dude, where's the power eye? Give me somebody that speaks power eye offense.
That's right. So I've just been poking around while we've been talking on Pro Football Reference at the guys who lasted the longest in terms of like playing really well through their prime, and even somebody like Steven Jackson or Brian Westbrook. And something you run into with almost every single one is that they're the guys who are catching tons of passes and getting 100 targets per year. So, I mean, some of them back in the day, they were getting 300 carries too. So it's not like a hard and fast thing. You have to limit it. But I think it might be a little bit of a hack to the system where everyone's looking at these running backs and saying, you can't pay them. There's no possible way. My one hack to that system would be, but what if? But what if you decided to move him not full James White, where you're actually a receiver who lines up in the backfield, which is a really clever innovation by the Patriots that they've used, but kind of like more in that direction. And someone like James White is a sneaky, super valuable player in the NFL that no one really talks about because they're like, oh, he's a scat back. And so he catches 70 passes at 9 yards a catch per year, and he's getting lots of first downs and everything else. But we're kind of like, oh, that's just a check down to the running back. No big deal. Well, Dalvin could be like a hyper version of that. with a little more running mixed in. So that's my thought.